Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee on Wednesday, the 22nd of February. This meeting has been live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. Remote participants, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. Please do not repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it's intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Can you confirm Sedrint and apologies, please? And I do approve the remote participation of members at this meeting. Thanks. Claire.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 2 apologies this morning from Councillors Drysdale and Thompson. We've got 6 members currently on Teams, being Councillors Blake, Dashford, Dennerley, Hill, Marshall and Wood. There's 2 members currently not present, being Councillors Ian Carruthers and Andrew Giusti.
Thank you, Claire. I have a declaration of interest from Councillor Wood. I don't know whether he's present yet or no, but he did notify me that he had worked for the applicant in agenda item 5. Therefore, he had a declaration in that particular agenda. Are there any other declarations of interest from members? Okay, in that case, move on to agenda item 3, the minute of the previous meeting, the 25th of January 2023, for approval. Is this a true record and are members content to approve the minutes as set out in the papers?
Happy to approve, you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Thanks, John. Thanks, members. Okay, we move on to the procedure today. Claire, can you just confirm the procedure members will follow today, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing and determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has provided with a list of the eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered to speak in advance to speak, make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Application Committee. Such members should withdraw from the meeting after making their presentation. Applicants or their agents, representatives were offered the option of attending today's meeting in person, joining remotely via MS Teams, or to provide a written statement to be read out on their behalf. And a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings and has been uploaded to the Teams chat. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, excepting for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard today, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Application Committee will then proceed to determine the application.
Thanks very much, Claire. And just for clarity, representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they're not introduced earlier. Two very brief additions. We have a representative from the Royal Borough of Annan Community Council speaking, and we have an objector in person speaking, and then two statements. We also have Councillor Maureen Johnson exercising her right to address the committee in agenda item 7. And Tom is the only BSL interpreter with John today, so we may have to have more frequent intervals than usual, a comfort break for both Tom and John. Having said that, members, we move on to agenda item number 4. An application for the installation of outdoor gym equipment, which is retrospective, at Springbells Hospital Road, Annan. It's a full application, reference number 22/1795/full. The recommendation is to approve subject to condition, and the case officer is Lindsay Little. Is it Lindsay speaking today? Lindsay, okay. When you're ready, just take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the retrospective installation of outdoor gym equipment. It is before you today as there are more than 6 separate individual and timelessly received objections on material planning grounds. There is also an objection from a statutory consultee, the Royal Borough of Annan Community Council, and officers are recommending approval. I'll now go through my presentation. This slide shows the location of the site, which is to the northern side of Annan. Oh, right, okay. Next slide, please. The site is located within the grounds of Aberlour Childcare Trust building, which sits on the north side of Hospital Road in Annan. There are residential properties to both sides and to the rear boundaries of the site and across the road to the front. Next slide, please. So the site plan shows the area outlined in red where the gym equipment has been installed to the northeast side of the building. The area is approximately 20 square metres and, as you can see, sits back from the public road behind several mature trees. I'll now go through some photographs. Next slide, please. So this is the host building. It's a traditional sandstone building with a slate roof, which sits behind a low sandstone wall. There's a small area of parking to the front and a wide access gate onto the road. The building has a long established non-residential use. Next slide, please. So this is just panning slightly to the right, and you could possibly see that the gym equipment is just to the right-hand side of the building there behind the trees. Next slide, please. And this is a view taken from the road directly in front of where the gym equipment is sited behind the trees again. Next slide, please. So here are some views of the actual gym equipment. There are 9 pieces in total, all finished mainly in a dark green metal material. The pieces vary in size, with the tallest just over 2 metres in height and the longest about 2.2 metres in length. The specifications for the equipment advise it's suitable for use by children with a height greater than 1.4 metres up to adult size. Next slide, please. These two photographs show where the site bounds onto neighbouring residential properties. The photo on the left shows a block wall bordering number 41 Hospital Road, which sits very slightly higher than the actual gym equipment. The right-hand photograph shows the rear curtilage of the building and the boundary with numbers 8, 9 and 10 spring bells. The ground levels here are flat and the boundary is marked by a post, rail and wire fence. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from the access gate onto the road and shows ground to the west side of the building and other residential properties beyond. Next slide, please. This view looks southwest along Hospital Road. You can see there's other residential properties across the road, and the building in blue, clad in blue to the rear left-hand side there, that's Newington Primary School. Next slide, please. And that's the view of Hospital Road looking in the other direction. Next slide, please. This application is considered acceptable and recommended for approval, subject to a condition relating to the installation of associated fencing, lighting and CCTV as mentioned in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. We have any questions for our case officer? Tony Beretti and then Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. When you mentioned lighting, had you given them an idea as to where you might put it?
No, the lighting was actually recommended by the community police officer. So there's nothing been suggested as far as the details of the lighting yet, but that'll be approved but in condition once we get the information.
That satisfies you, Tony. Thank you. I have Councillor Campbell and then Councillor Howie.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members, and thanks for your report. Lindsay, on page 21, part of your report on road safety, the very last sentence where it says no formal objections on the grounds of road safety from the roads officers. However, the roads officers are unable to recommend in favour, according to his report on page 19. I'm just wondering just how much weight members should give to the roads officer's report if there's not been a formal objections from the roads officer. If you can help me with that, please.
I think I'll ask David Lindsay, because it is a contentious issue, the way that some consultees respond to our officers' inquiries. So David.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, this is a timely question in that we had a meeting with our roads colleagues just last week to discuss a number of things, and one of the things which I did raise was on a few occasions members have expressed some concern about the way that roads recommendations are worded, so that was raised with them. I think there is a need for clarity that roads officers need to, as planning officers have to do, make a very clear recommendation. It's either approve or refuse. They need to say they object or they don't. So that point has been made to them, so I don't think you'll be seeing similar comments in future.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate that.
Thanks, John. And I think, to be fair, Lindsay's assessment on the response is that the recommendation is still to approve. Councillor Howie, Sean Marshall and Ian Carruthers. Ian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Lindsay, it's a retrospective application. Can you say how long the equipment has been in situ as such, and has it generated any complaints of antisocial behaviour to the police?
Lindsay.
I'm not aware of exactly when the equipment was installed, although I am aware that there was a complaint made to our planning enforcement team last summer and the application has been made as a response to that complaint. I only have the information from the police that is contained in the report, and I don't think it specifically says that there has been any antisocial behaviour. Sorry, I'm just getting...
I think David's found the paragraph, Lindsay.
Yes, it's 2.2. I mean, I would have to say the information we got from them is their comments on the proposal. I couldn't honestly say whether they've had any antisocial behaviour complaints directly. That wasn't part of their response.
But Lindsay has clarified that there was a report to the planning enforcement officer in relation to presumably a nuisance of some kind, and that's why it came to our attention. You content with that, Ian? Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Marshall, any in Carruthers?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, my concern was similar to John Campbell's with regards to the comments from the council roads officer. It sounds that they're unable to recommend in favour of this proposal, so it suggests, well, I don't think they can sit in the fence on this one here, although there's no fence there at the moment, but it's proposed. But it sounds as though that if you can't support something, then you're not in favour of it. But also as well, I just wanted to ask, when the council roads officers looked at that, have they been on site? Because they seem to only be addressing the no discrete parking available in the vicinity issue. But there's also the issue of lack of barriers. There's also potentially, we don't know if there's signage there to indicate that there's an outdoor gym. And my concern is that Hospital Road is one of the longest, straightest roads in Annan. And as you've seen from the pictures as well, the Newton Primary School is just further along the road. It's the largest primary school in Dumfries and Galloway. So I would have thought that something like this would have merited the road safety manager, Tony Toppin, looking at this area to confirm that apart from the no discrete parking, there is also road safety issues that we should really alleviate concern or actually have a report back on if there is any road safety issues.
I didn't hear a question there, Sean. I think that was an observation.
No, I'm asking if the road safety officer has actually visited the site, or a roads officer to ascertain, if there is any road safety issues. It only seems to address the no discrete parking.
I don't know whether Lindsay can answer that or not, because it would be passed to the roads department, but I'll ask her. Lindsay, has Tony Topping assessed this in a road safety context?
The consultation response that I received from roads is just what you see in the report. I don't have any specific response to say that Tony Topping has had any input in that response.
No, that's what I thought, because it says quite clearly the roads officer were consulted, so I would be of the opinion that would definitely go to Tony Topping, and no formal objection grounds road safety had been made given the urban context. So if you're not content with that, Sean, when we come to the determination phase, you can either suggest that we invite further comment from Tony Topping, that would mean deferring the decision, or members are entitled to make a decision based on their opinion, which would be contrary to the officer's recommendation and the report from the roads officer, but that's within our gift. So if you're content, Sean, with the fact that we don't have confirmation that Tony was consulted, we can come back to you when we're in session. Because
thanks.
The Aberlour aren't here in person, they have sent a statement. So if you're content with that, Sean, I will come back to you when we're in session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Councillor Carruthers and then Councillor Slater, and we're still on questions for the case officer. Ian Carruthers, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a good suggestion you've just outlined on the back of what Councillor Marshall said. My question is around the potential 24/7 operations that's brought by both lots of representation. Well, I'll say that local residents along with the community council. The conditions don't restrict that. I just want to make sure that I'm quite clear. So if this was to be approved, but I think it's right we should defer it for further information. If it was to be approved, it could actually be used 24/7. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Ian. So again, that's not a question for Lindsay. It's an observation. We'll come back to you when we're in session as well. Is that right?
No, it is the question. I agree with your statement earlier in regards to forget about that. I think this probably should be deferred. My question is this: if it say it was to be approved, it could actually. There's no condition there that says you will operate between a certain time, which most would be a standard condition. It looks like it's open 24/7, and the concern from both parties, you could say, in regards to local residents and the community council, is noise and disturbance and supervised access 24 hours, 7 days a week. So it's that point. There's no condition here that says, for what I can see, which is there's only one condition really. I think. Look at the recommendation.
I think David's picked that up. Ian, do you have a response for that, David?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I mean, certainly it's a piece of land which is unrestricted, and therefore I don't think is competent to attach a condition restricting the hours of operation of it. If the concern is antisocial behaviour, then that's picked up in paragraph 4.7. That's a matter for Police Scotland to actually address. So, no, I don't think you could reasonably attach a condition restricting the hours of operation of it.
Thanks, Ian. And obviously you'll have another opportunity when we're in session. Last speaker, David Slater. David, please.
This is a question for the case officer. The equipment appears to be on grass. And obviously, should it be on maybe a safety area? And also grass gets pretty worn down. It was used quite a lot at that area. So the question is really, should there be a surface around the area? Because quite a lot of these gyms have a proper surface around them as well for safety, and also because grass can get pretty well worn with a lot of people using it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks. No surface has been proposed in the application, and I'm only assessing on the information that has been submitted, so they haven't proposed to put any particular surface down other than what you can see in the photographs. It's grass. Yeah.
And it might not form part of the planning application anyway, David, but I have visited locations in my ward where that outdoor gym equipment is installed, and very often there's rubberised introduced into the ground, and grass grows through it to give the appearance of outdoors. David, do you want to add to that?
Well, I suppose really just to say that there's a difference between a children's play park, where you would normally expect such things, although that's not actually a planning consideration. The intention here is it's slightly different. It's aged 10 and upwards, or height restriction upwards. So it's not really a planning consideration as to whether or not it's beyond just grass.
Thanks very much, David. Thank you. That concludes the questions for case officer. So we now move on to our list of registered speakers. So the first speaker is Mrs. Marion Stewart, who represents Royal Borough of Annan Community Council. Marion, you will have 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And if you'd be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you, I'd be grateful. So Claire and I will time you, and I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go just to bring your presentation to an end. Thank you. Just whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you. Okay. My name is Marion Stewart. I'm the Secretary for the Royal Borough of Annan Community Council. The Community Council actually informed the Council of this installation without planning permission. As you will see, the Community Council's primary objections are loss of privacy and noise to overlooking residents. Residents have been subjected to privacy issues as the development is in clear sight of their properties and garden areas. One resident at great expense built a 6-foot wall, and that has been seen in the photographs, to try and alleviate some of the noise, although it only does so to a degree. This was not noted in the planning officer's report because it was done after the equipment was put in. Noise from the development is considerable. The use of the equipment is noisy, shouting and swearing, etc. The Community Council feels the development is not being used for the primary purpose of the charity's planning application, in that it is not the clients of the charity that are using the equipment. The building is not used at all after 3 p.m. and therefore there is no supervision at all. There has been lots of police attendance at this development because of antisocial behaviour. The gym equipment is primarily used by local teenagers and young children, and the development itself leads itself to vandalism and criminality. The Community Council believes there is a health and safety issue with the development, as the equipment has restrictions on it for people over the height of 1.4 metres. The development is not supervised at all. Gates to the property are left open, therefore children under that height restriction can use it and could lead to serious injury.
You have 30 seconds to go, Marion.
Aberlour Trust has owned and used the facility for many years without any problems, and the Community Council backs their work with disadvantaged children and families. However, because of the problems caused in this area, we would ask the retrospective planning permission is not granted. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Marion. Thank you for being bang on time. Have you members any questions for the representative of Ann Community Council? Councillor Barretti.
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for that presentation. Just a quick note, and it has been mentioned that the equipment is on grass. Has there been any reports of dog fouling to the Community Council in that area? Because I didn't see any indication of bins or anything like that, and it's an open area.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There are no bins. Dog fouling is a problem in the area because of the grass. People do bring their dogs in there for walking.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tony. Members will need to note, though, that that's no part of planning consideration. Any other questions for Marion? In that case, thank you for coming forward, Marion. Thank you for the presentation. We move on to the next representative, Alan K. Allen, if you'd like to come forward, please.
That's me.
No, goodness, that's next. Mr. McIntyre's next. And then Aberlour comes last.
Statement.
You've got the other listed the way. Alan, the same arrangement, sir, please. Start whenever you're ready. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion. And you'll be kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you. I'd be grateful. There is a little button just in front of the console, and you'll see a red light come on in your speaker. And then whenever you're ready, thank you.
Right. Good morning, councillors. Hospital Road was a quiet residential area of Annan. The application site was a pleasant green grassed area. As soon as the equipment was erected, the character of the area changed. It brought crowds of young children and teenagers into the area. It caused activity and noise between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Fences were damaged and the site was covered in litter. The applicants state that the gym was built for the benefit of the children attending the Care Trust, but is available for anyone in the community no matter their age, ability, size or fitness level. The equipment is rarely used by the few children attending the Trust and adults wishing to improve their fitness. It is mostly used by young children under the manufacturer's permitted height for using this equipment or as a meeting place for teenagers. Consultations. The police response is unclear. Dumfries have no objections, however, community policing Lockerbie noted during a visit in the winter, not the summer when the troubles really flare up. Broken glass, damaged shrubbery and litter. The response also stated that the site now lends itself to be used as an area where persons can gather and cause antisocial behaviour. Lighting is poor and natural surveillance limited. Access is uncontrolled. The site is rarely used as intended. Police say that the recommendations may help reduce the risk of crime and antisocial behaviour. There was no crime or antisocial behaviour in the area prior to the equipment being installed and no requirement for a police response. Roads are unable to recommend this proposal. Their report does not mention the bus stop just along from the entrance to the site, and roads realise that the gate is never locked, and would this warrant grounds for refusal? Contaminated land. The planning officer mentions contaminated land relating to the former use of the site, which was Annan Fever Hospital. Is the land contaminated? The consultation letter does not answer this vital question. Instead, it refers to a planning application for the erection of an access ramp at 10 Muirfield Gardens, Annan. Does the no objection relate to this application or the Muirfield Gardens one? The planning officer reports that there does not appear to be play equipment or gym equipment with close vicinity to the site. This is untrue. There's a play area at Turnberry Road and gyms at Newington Leisure Centre and the Silver Law, all within close proximity to the site. The planning officer also states that the site was previously used by a playgroup, therefore the principle of the site being used by children is established. The playgroup occupied the building, not the site, 30 years ago. Their opening hours were 9 a.m. till 3 p.m, 5 days a week.
You have 30 seconds to go on.
Not the 24 hours, 365 days a year that this application would allow. The children were indoors, supervised and did not cause noise and disruption to the neighbouring properties. They didn't curse, swear, shout, drop litter or vandalise the area. The police were never involved. As neighbours, we are most concerned by the inability to control access to the site. We appreciate Aberlour community's work, and if they were able to restrict access by enclosing the development within a proper metal fence and a locked gate, limiting opening hours and provide supervision, this would go a long way to meeting the neighbourhood concerns.
Thank you very much, and thanks for keeping to the time as well. Questions for Mr. Kay? In that case, thank you, sir, for your presentation. Members, we now have a written statement from Mr. McIntyre, who's an objector. That will be followed by the representation from Aberlour Child Care Trust, who's the applicant. Just whenever you're ready, Claire.
Okay. Contrary to the statement in the planning application that the development does not fall within Schedule 3 of the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedure Scotland Regulations 2013, I believe that the application does fall within Schedule 3 and in particular paragraph 8 of that schedule, namely that the application will encompass all the statements in paragraph 8, i.e. A. Affect residential property by reason of fumes, noise, vibration, smoke, artificial lighting or discharge of any solid or liquid substance. B. Alter the character of an area of established amenity. C. Bring crowds into a generally quiet area. D. Cause activity and noise between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. E. Introduce significant change into a homogeneous area. And my specific objections to development are: 1. Noise. Since the gym equipment has been built, the site has become a meeting area for unsupervised youngsters who are constantly shouting, screaming and using profanities. This generally starts from 5 p.m. and lasts until 10 p.m, although on occasions it has gone on beyond that time. The shouting and constant stream of profanities is clearly heard from my back garden and even from inside my house. And when my 4 young grandchildren visit me, it is particularly totally unacceptable. This was a quiet area without any issues before this outdoor gym equipment was built. To disturbance, on a significant number of occasions I've heard a group of youngsters from the outdoor gym area plotting and carrying out knock and run on adjacent houses, some of who are vulnerable tenants, and it must be very distressing for them to be repeatedly subject to this behaviour. I'm not aware of this happening prior to the equipment being built in the 38 years I have lived here. 3. Litter. Bottles and cans are regularly thrown into my garden from the adjoining gym equipment area. This again has not been an issue prior to the building of the equipment. 4. Impact on the homogeneous area. It has been previously proven that a gym play park is neither suitable nor appropriate in this general area. About 20 years ago or so, the council built a short-lived play park about 150 metres from this gym equipment alongside the old Newington schoolhouse. The council had to move the play park shortly after building it due to similar antisocial behaviours, and they are currently experiencing. It should be noted that this is now removes council-built play park also directly impacted less neighbouring properties than the current development, and the equipment is being used as a meeting place solely by youngsters for antisocial behaviours. I've yet to see a single person use the equipment for what it is intended to be used. The gym equipment is designed for persons over 4'7" in height, and a large proportion of the children who congregate are under this height. There are no restrictions, controls, information, or supervision of equipment. The equipment would seem to be more appropriately placed
Can you just finish that
ever
paragraph,
home
please?
of a more similar place, not in a residential area.
Thank you, Claire. Now go on to the statement from the applicant, and it's the same 3 minutes. Claire, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Aberlour Childcare Trust have submitted a retrospective planning application for the installation of outdoor gym equipment at their facility at Hospital Road, Annan. The Trust fully supports the Planning Officer's recommendation for the approval of this application and requests that members uphold this recommendation and grant retrospective planning permission. As background, Aberlour Childcare Trust are a charity that helps disadvantaged children and families in Scotland. Our vision is to give every child a chance to flourish and through this contribute to building a fairer and more equal society. Our mission is to deliver that vision through reducing the impact of poverty, disadvantage and early trauma on children and families. Specifically in the Dumfries and Galloway area, we help children, young people and families who are struggling to manage the challenges of day-to-day life. The support we provided to families might include offering practical help with schoolwork, supporting family members to attend meetings when necessary, helping to establish family routines and boundaries, building life skills such as healthy eating, cooking on a budget, or encouraging participation in parent and toddler groups. Our Communities Together hubs in Stranraer, Dumfries and Annan are open to all, providing a range of benefits including community laundry and clothing, food support, lending library, garden space, family and meeting rooms, community orchard and outdoor community gyms. At Communities Together Annan we work from our property called Spring Bells. Annan Academy is our anchor tenant as part of a joint partnership to provide education and support services. We also help facilitate supervised family time with the Dumfries and Galloway Council Social Work Department. Supervised family time can be stressful and traumatic events for families. Having the outdoor gym on site can make a real difference to trying to have positive outcomes from these meetings. The objections to the application from local residents and the Community Council have been fully considered by the Trust. We are happy to work with our neighbours to help alleviate concerns. Have agreed to a condition being attached to consent for the provision of fencing, lighting and CCTV to be installed. We also undertake regular maintenance and cutting back of any existing trees and bushes. As detailed in the committee report, proposed development accords with the provision of the development plan. In particular, the proposal accords with Policy 21, Play, Recreation and Sport, and the recently adopted MPF4, which encourages spaces and opportunities to play, recreation and sport. It also accords with Policy 23, Health and Safety Support proposals that will have a positive effect on health, such as opportunities for exercise. In relation to conservatories, For parking provision, the gym equipment provides a local facility to nearby residents. It's the intention that people will walk to use the equipment and are unlikely to drive to the site. The equipment has been in place since May 2022, and the experience to date is that most people have walked to the site and there's not increased parking issues locally. The outdoor gym at Spring Bells will provide several benefits to the community, including a focal point for communities and families
Just
to come
finish that
together.
paragraph, Claire,
This will
please.
help to support a network and build bonds and relationships.
Thank you, Claire. That concludes the representations. So members are now in session, and I know that Councillor Marshall and Councillor Crothers may have specific matters they want to discuss with members. So I will invite other members that might want to address the committee, and then I'll go back to Councillor Marshall and Councillor Carruthers. So open to members. Councillor Slater, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is mainly an observation. There's one of these gyms in Battery Park in Greenet, I think it's Greenet or Gouret, they're quite close together. And it's well signposted, it takes up a very small area. It's well signposted, the instructions are all in the machines to use. And I have to say that was in summertime, and it's used very much used. So it's really an observation that they can be well used if they're well signposted, and that as well as how to work it all and how to use it. And it takes up a very small area. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David, for that observation. Doesn't appear there's anybody else wanting to speak at session, so I'll come to Councillor Marshall and then Councillor Carruthers. Sean, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I said, the point I made earlier, I am concerned that on the response from Rhodes, I do think, I'm minded either to defer this or, on the basis that we need to have it confirmed that there has been a proper road safety assessment carried out at that location. If it hasn't been, then there needs to be one because there is issues there. I am concerned as well about there's a low wall onto Hospital Road, so there's easy access gained. The police have confirmed there's a history of antisocial behaviour, and it's not only there. Unfortunately, these type of the likes of an outdoor gym or a play park, for some reason, do attract antisocial behaviour, and we've experienced that on an ongoing basis at another play park in Annan. So I do think as well, Mr. Kay's point about, I am concerned that, out with the uses, the opening hours of Aberlour, that this is easily accessible. And that is where most of the issues are actually arising from. And there's no restriction. And I think, probably if we were minded to approve it, we would have to put a condition that I think that you would have to have a locked, secure fence to control use of that area, because it's obvious that it's been used at all times, and especially in the evening. So I'll wait and hear what other members say, but at the moment I'm minded to either defer for confirmation from Rhodes or to refuse on the grounds of road safety and noise and disturbance.
I'll come back to you after I've spoken to Councillor Carruthers, but bearing in mind that road safety is featured on page 21, 4.8, their council roads officer has been consulted on the development, and he then makes an observation that no formal objection on grounds of road safety has been made, so they have been consulted. So I'd maybe ask you what detail you want, Sean. And as for a gate at night, I've already asked David about that, and it's something we're normally encouraged only to apply conditions that are enforceable, and it would be absolutely unenforceable for the planning department to attend if folk were getting access out with the sort of regulated hours. That's why that condition has not been suggested, as part of the recommended decisions in the paper. But I will come back to you after I've spoken to Councillor Carruthers, and I see Councillor Carruthers wants to speak. So, Ian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I'm losing signal here for some reason, I'm getting bumped out. So please just stop me if you can't hear what I'm saying. So I've missed everything what was said previously by Councillor Marshall. But my take on it is that we haven't got enough information to start off with in order to make a decision today. I suppose without rehearsing the points that we've made recently, but I used to work very close to this area. There is has already been outlined, open space allocated there. There's plenty of other bits. The street is extremely difficult. All 4 councillors, I know for a fact, because we've discussed it at many a meeting, how many complaints we get in regards to the volume of traffic there, because quite often the Newton schools that set 105, 110% capacity. It's a very, very popular school. My understanding is, going back to the comment you just made and what David made earlier, it's white land we're looking at there in real terms. We could condition it to put a fence around it, which would then allow us to apply the limits of use, restricted times use. But I'm not saying that should, in its current format in front of me right now, I'd want to refuse it. But we should be at minimum deferring this, not only for what's been raised earlier in regards to road safety concerns, the noise nuisance, the unrestricted time that's available, but it's also the conditions that are outlined, or the condition and a number of things that are in that. We need clarity in regards to that, the lighting and so on and so forth. So I would like to see it being adjourned or suspended, deferred, Chair, to the next meeting or to the next available meeting where we can actually get that information. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I will ask you and Sean for a form of words and justification for deferral. What additional information you expect from the deferral from the Roads Department or from the Road Safety section within the Council. And you have to bear in mind that by and large the Council, and I know this might be a private development, but we do not restrict hours of access to play areas or public open space. But I'll ask you and Sean what additional information you need that you feel is necessary before you can make a decision on this.
Yeah,
and then I'll need
come
to
in
go to other members.
Yeah, can I come back in on that, Chair?
Yes, Sean.
Yeah, I would like to defer on the basis, and I think it was mentioned right at the very start that, the comments that are made from roads are not clear. It doesn't support this proposal, and that's got to change in the future. So really, my concern is that it's only addressed the one issue, which is no discrete parking. So I would like more information on the road safety issues that have been raised.
So do you want a road safety assessment in the whole area, or within a specific distance of the site, or is it just in relation to the site itself?
It's in relation to the site itself and positioned where it is. I would like a road safety assessment.
A road safety audit. I'll ask David to come in.
Chair, if I can assist. Basically, when we carry out a consultation with roads officers, they speak amongst themselves, and when there's supposed to be anything which goes wider than, it's normally Kevin Morrison is the team leader that we deal with primarily, where it is considered that the scale of the development is such that you need a full-blown roads assessment, then yes, they will liaise with Tony Topping. But it is a case of proportionality. You're looking here at a number of a number of gym equipment, things which are there on site. It wouldn't in itself normally be the sort of development which would generate traffic that is going to require such an assessment. In terms of the issue about fencing, members will note that condition 1, which is recommended there, does require details of the proposed fencing. My view remains that I don't think it is competent to require the hours of operation, and members would have to be aware that there's a risk here about us being unable to enforce any condition that's put onto this effect. But it is open to yourselves, bearing in mind that caveat, that you could require, for example, fencing that would enclose the entire gym facility. And if you were wanting that to then be entirely closed off, there would be a potential issue about ensuring that that was closed when the building was closed. There's an enforceability issue there, but that is one solution if you're trying to ensure that there is no antisocial behaviour whatsoever.
Before I ask Ian, and I know Ian's keen to speak again, would it satisfy you and Ian if we asked the Roads Department for a definition? Either they do or they do not support this application and the basis for whatever judgment that might be. And we could also, we have absolutely no right to demand it, but we could ask if a representative of Aberlour would be willing to attend a future meeting to answer any points that elected members might have in relation to their attitude towards the use of this particular facility. I don't know that's, I'm not putting words into your mouth, Sean, but it's a suggestion. Ian Carruthers, I'll ask Ian in.
Actually, I think it's appropriate what you've just said there. I was going to pick up on the first point, but not the second. But I do think that at least give them the option, because I'm sure after that level of investment, they would want to do everything they can to retain the construction or the park, so to speak, what they've built. But for me, it's conditions one. David's touched on that briefly. Condition one, I need to see that detail rather than delegate here. That's what's important to me, because I think if it's the proper fencing in the right manner, and that was proposed, and this was restricted, the fence had already been constructed, the level of representations in that area from both the community council and local residents, they probably wouldn't have raised their heads in the same way, because it most likely, now I think there's a 99.9% chance it would be restricted to the use of the intended people who are looking to use it, which is Aberlour's customers, so to speak, but the people they look after, the young people. I think if it was being used for that, there'd be much less concerns, and that's where my concerns are raised, going back to, I think Sean's touching there's road safety issues, but the conditions in condition one in particular, Chair, and the fences already mentioned there, that was my thing. And there is, my understanding, maybe pick up on this offline, but this is designated white land, I could be wrong, there's open spaces next to it, you've got bits like a field side's got open space and other bits, and comments made in regards to what's happened historically around that and what open space is allocated, but this is more white land rather than open space, but it's being treated in that way. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, we'll try and bring this a particular agenda item to a conclusion. So I'll ask Sean for a form of words. I'll ask you, Ian, if you're happy to support that form of words. I'll ask governance if that's an acceptable form of words as a motion, and I'll go to members to see if there's any alternative view. So, form of words, Sean, please.
Yeah, I'm happy with what you suggested, Chair, as a way forward.
Okay, you're proposing that we defer this agenda item for a further consultation with roads and seek from them an opinion. It's not an ambiguous thing. It's whether or not they see this as a road safety issue that needs to be addressed. If it does, what recommendations they would place before us. And although we have no right to ask, that we invite Aberlour to attend to speak to committee on the concerns raised by both elected members and members of the public that were present today and written representations. Does that sound all right to you, Ian?
Chair, just come back, it's absolutely bang on, but I think if you could add the pieces of information that are missing in condition one, as many of them as we can actually get, that gives an extra level of detail that's not in front of us at the moment. I think that's appropriate to ask for that in order for us as the councillors who are making this decision to consider it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. I think David's got that, so I'll ask him to encapsulate what's been said. I'll just ask Sean again if that's all right, and then I'll ask governance if it's an appropriate and acceptable proposal, and if I'll then go to members for an alternative. So David, please.
Chair, my only concern would be if you're asking for additional information to basically expand on what's covered by condition 1 already, which is a suspensive condition. If you're wanting all that extra information in, and then as a committee you decide to refuse it, there's a question about whether that's reasonable.
So is the best plan to refuse it and allow the applicant to come back with an alternative proposal outlining it? Because we've still got an issue about roads. And unless we drill down into the response by roads, there's little point in the applicant reapplying, because if roads don't enhance the opinion they've already given, we find ourselves in a position again where we're not receiving an appropriate and acceptable response from the roads department. David, and I see Councillor Campbell want to speak. Oh, I was going to let you speak first, but come in, John.
I was waiting for David to come in as well, Chair. Yeah, I'm quite happy with condition 1. The point that I raised earlier on, which obviously Councillor Marshall, reiterated about the road side of it. It's unfortunate where we are because of the roads officer not committing one way or another. So maybe we should just defer just on that point alone, if that helps. But I'm more than happy with condition 1. I don't want it to be too unreasonable, for this particular development. But if we were to defer just purely on the road side of it, I'd be quite happy to go along with that. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Colours, are you happy to defer just on the roads issue?
If that's the way forward, but I'm still confused in regards to what David said there. It sounds to me, I may be completely wrong with this, David, but it sounds to me that we can delegate this to a planning official, in order to approve or refuse, but we can't make that decision without further information ourselves. We'll be on dubious grounds. I don't understand that point at all. Sorry, Chair. But happy to proceed in the best way forward, as you see fit, Chair.
It seems to be a reasonable way forward, Ian. Sean, are you happy that we defer this simply on the roads issue on the basis that we don't have a definition from the roads department, and as such we expect a formal response from the roads department as to whether or no this is an acceptable proposal, and we invite Aberlour to join us if they feel inclined to respond to questions members might have, and Councillor Carruthers might get the opportunity at that juncture, if they turn up, to put any further questions to them.
Yes, I'm happy on that basis.
Okay, so that's what we have. We have a proposal from Sean, seconded by, I presume, Councillor Carruthers, that this agenda item be deferred, seeking further clarification from the Roads Department on whether or not they do or do not support the application in terms of road safety. And at the same time, we cannot request or demand, we invite Aberlour to attend a meeting when this will be brought to members again to respond to any concerns members might have. Is that a reasonable proposal, Claire?
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion and a seconder, and then I've got Councillor Ferguson. I've got Councillor McFarlane coming in now. And then...
I'm a little bit offended by that last remark, sorry, Chair. I don't know if I'm throwing a fly in the ointment here, but certainly the residents and the community council raised issues of antisocial behaviour. Now, reading through the report, there doesn't seem to be an indication that there has been antisocial behaviour, but the police officers have put in recommendations which may mitigate that. If we're going to defer this, would it be possible for us to ask Police Scotland for a report of incidents that they've encountered to give us an indication of whether that is actually an issue that would be significant and may shape our thinking? Thanks, Chair.
I'll check with David, but I don't think that's a planning consideration. I am sure that's a policing matter, and that would be dealt with in a different forum. I've got Keith wanting to come in, but David first on that particular point.
I think I have to go back to the fact that if you're looking at what is actually proposed here, it's the gym equipment. Gym equipment in itself, if it's operated properly, should not cause an antisocial behaviour. It's the people who are using it and the manner in which they're using it. So in land use planning terms, I don't think it's the sort of thing we should be getting into, but clearly from what we've been told by the Community Council and neighbours, there has been a constant level of communication with the police and incidents. So I think it is quite clear. I don't think we need any further confirmation of that, we can take their word for that.
Keith, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something. If we defer this on getting more information on the roads issue, does that mean when it comes back to us, we're only going to be able to refuse it or approve it on the roads issue, or are we still going to be able to take into account the residents' concerns about antisocial behaviour and nuisance? And when we talk about antisocial behaviour, it's fine to say that the gym equipment itself isn't responsible for antisocial behaviour, but it's the location of the gym equipment, which is presumably what the residents are talking about. They're not saying that they're against gym equipment as such. They're saying there are other gym equipment available in the area. They're saying that the actual location of it is the problem, and the fact that it's unsupervised.
Aye, the problem we have is the applicant probably won't want to locate it elsewhere. They have offered mitigation measures that they don't have to. They intend to put in CCTV. They intend to put up a fence. They have offered to maintain the vegetation to a level that would ensure there was always a external scrutiny or visibility. And I am sure we will dig ourselves a hole if we start refusing plan applications, because we could have the same thing with Neighbourhood Day. My neighbour's got to be a nuisance because they party at the weekends. That's not the role of this particular service. We deal with planning applications, and the objectors have absolutely outlined what their concerns are. It's where the extent of our responsibility and a duty lies. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, sure. I mean, probably just to answer Councillor Carruthers' query before, just to make it clear, what I'm talking about here is that if inherently as a committee you feel this is an inappropriate land use in that area and it cannot be resolved by any other mechanism, if there's a fundamental road safety issue, if there's no means of conditioning it to be acceptable, then clearly your view should be to refuse it, and also then to require enforcement action to require its removal. What I'm concerned about is just going out and seeking more and more information, and then causing, the applicant will have to, if they're having to provide additional information up front before knowing if an application is going to be approved, that's the point I was saying it might be unreasonable. So it's almost like I would feel more comfortable if you're able to give some clear steer whether or not this is wholly unacceptable location. It's never going to be able to be made acceptable by any conditions or any alterations to it, rather than, if you like, just postponing it.
I'd be concerned about that as well, because you're then placing an onus on the roads department. You're saying we've got to refuse it unless you tell us it's all right. That's no reasonable either. And it's a cleft stick we have, and it's probably been caused by the roads department. So I suppose maybe the question might be, would we approve this subject to an acceptable revised opinion from the roads department, or do we simply want a further discussion when the roads department send a response, which David's saying probably isn't reasonable either? So the question might be, would we be minded to approve this if roads came back with a positive response, or are we uncomfortable in any case and simply want to put a stop to the use now? Councillor Carruthers, we're going a long time, and I have given an undertaking to Tom and John that we would give them regular breaks. So if we can't bring us to a conclusion in the next few minutes, I'm going to stop for 10 minutes. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. Very brief. Thank you, David, for your comments here. So my comment is as simple as if they come back, if we delegate that to a planning officer of the council and say, okay, and the planning officer thinks, okay, 1.2 metre fencing around the perimeter, open boarded, that's fine. Where kids will jump over that as if it wasn't there. Where we might think it's 2.4 metres close boarded right round the perimeter, then that secures the use of that at that particular time, use with the customers that should be the young people. I think what you said earlier, Chair, in regards to your point, it's a yes or no, and then Councillor Marshall will give you reassurance in regards to that. I think you're comfortable with that. But that was my point in the fencing, David. I maybe never made that clear enough, and I should have.
I've got Councillor Driver. Do you want to come in? No. Okay. David, do you want to go now?
Well, it's probably hopefully to try and help. I did specifically speak about this application in our meeting with our roads colleagues and mentioned that, I was uncomfortable, knew that the committee were uncomfortable about the particular wording they have chosen. And it was explained to me what the situation is. And the wording is in your report, that roads officers are unable to recommend in favour of the proposal. That means they are basically flagging up that it doesn't wholly accord with what they would be looking for, but it falls short of them formally objecting to it. Now, that's the wording we need to get to in future. But basically, they are not objecting. They are flagging up that they have concerns about it. They can't support it. They can't recommend in favour of it. But they are not objecting. So I don't know if you're going to get anything different as a result of deferring the application. And I know they've only mentioned here about the car parking, but again, it's got to be proportionate in terms of the development. Is it going to be requiring a full-blown road traffic assessment, given that, I know Hospital Road, I know Newington School's there, and therefore there's a lot of traffic calming in the area anyway. I know of the parking situation. Are you going to get anything different from roads to what they've already said?
Given that the applicant has another opportunity, Laura?
Thank you, Chair. I take on board David's points, but from a legal point of view, I would suggest that if there are road safety concerns, as the consultation has not specifically mentioned road safety, that roads should be asked to provide a consultation specifically on that point. I appreciate that the development itself is relatively minor, but given its location near to a school and on a busy road, if it is reasonably foreseeable that there could be a road safety issue, then I feel we as a council should be going back to roads and asking them to specifically address their minds to that point if it is something that is being considered.
Thanks. Well, I was going to suggest, given that the applicant has an opportunity to come back again with a further application, we just refuse this. We tell them what the refusal is, and if they do come back, that we instruct roads to bring a proper assessment with a further consultation. Can we do that, David?
Yes, it's entirely open to you to refuse it. Obviously, the applicant has a right of appeal, and the other part to it is that if you do go for a decision to refuse, that would be a decision to refuse. You would still have the development there, so that you would have to consider whether or not you are going to issue an instruction for enforcement action to be taken to require the removal of all the existing gym equipment as well.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've listened to this and we're going round in circles here. I think, as an application, a planning applications committee, we could make a decision to defer for more information. Simple as that. We're looking for more information on the suggestion that there is some concerns about road safety issues. And we want that information to be brought back. So therefore, Chair, I suggest that, if we move forward here, it's a deferral until we get the information that we require as a planning applications committee on the road safety issues that have been addressed during this conversation. And that would be the end of it, Chair, as part of that movement going forward. I actually think we're kicking this down the road and there's going to be another 6 months of antisocial behaviour if we didn't go with the recommendation. But I'm happy to defer if members wish that information.
But the problem, or the point that David made was, at this juncture, are we saying, to save kicking it down the road, as you say, in my language, kicking it into long grass, are we saying that every other aspect of this, including the conditions that were to be applied, we're happy with? So what we're actually saying is if roads come back and say that there is no road safety concern that needs to be addressed, we will automatically approve this application. You're saying that, Archie? Okay.
If that needs to be, you know, an amendment to whatever's being proposed here, I'm happy to say that. But, you know, there is an issue here that needs to be addressed by the local community council and by residents, things like that. But if, you know, we don't have any reasons for not approving this small piece of gym equipment other than antisocial behaviour and the questions on the road issues. The antisocial behaviour is not a planning committee issue. And if we kick it down the road, there's going to be 6 months more of antisocial behaviour. So it's about if there is no requirement for, you know, the roads, if roads departments say there is no issue here, then I think we approve as is.
So there's a better question then. Are you going to delegate to officers? Because you might as well. If roads come along and say, we have no issue, we don't need a planning meeting for that. So are we saying that we instruct our planning officer, Lindsay, to go back to roads and say, we need a determination from you, no vague reply. If the determination is that it is safe to leave that equipment in situ, then it's approved. That's what you're saying. I'll second that. Is there any other proposal?
My proposal still stands, Chair.
You need to put it in words then, Sean, and hopefully we'll get a second and we'll go to a vote.
Chair, I've already, and Sean's been through it. Claire's agreed that it was competent at the time to defer. It wasn't to refuse or to agree subject to further delegation. It was to defer for further, and that takes precedence over the motion to approve.
Okay, that's fine. Claire already confirmed that. So I have, pardon? Yes, you have a motion from Councillor Dennerley wants to speak, and I'll ask him to speak before we go to the vote, but no one else because he had his hand up a while ago. You have a motion from Councillor Dryborough to delegate two planning officers to Lindsay to discuss with the Roads Department and get a determination on whether or not there is a road safety issue. And if they say there is not, then approval or permission is granted. You have an amendment from Councillor Marshall and Councillor Crothers to defer this application for further information, and that's information in relation to road safety and a road safety audit. David?
Sorry, Chair, Claire can probably better advise, but my understanding was if there was a move to defer it, you had to decide whether or not you're determining it today first before you move to anything else.
Okay. Yeah, you're probably right. Okay. So, John, did you want to come in because we're about to have a vote on whether or not to continue this today? Tom?
Yeah, no problem. Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a very complicated discussion. I understand that. Ian Carruthers. Yeah, I definitely understand the debate. Sorry, with Ian Carruthers, your point that you're bringing forward, your proposal. And as it's been explained, you know, I'm happy to second that as well. Second Ian's points.
Thank you, Tom. Well, the first vote we have is whether or not we continue this agenda item today or whether it's deferred. So Councillor Carruthers has asked for a deferral, so we've got to decide that first. Or Sean Marshall and Councillor Carruthers have asked for a deferral, and Councillor Dryborough and I have said we have enough information to determine this today. So the first vote is whether or not we determine it today or defer. Councillor Carruthers?
Sorry, Chair, you answered it there, but I take it you haven't formally put forward, but I accept that you and yourself and Councillor Marshall, you put forward a different proposal, but yourself and, Councillor Dryborough have said you'd rather proceed today.
Yes, you and Sean are asking for a deferral, and Archie and I are saying we don't need one. We can determine today. That's the first vote, and the motion's yours, I think, in the amendments, Archie and I, but I don't really care which form it is. Claire?
Right, okay.
Just clarify it, Claire,
Okay,
please.
First of all, we've got a procedural vote. Motion proposed by Councillor Marshall, seconded by Councillor Crullers. That's to defer for more information, particularly wanting information from the Roads Department on whether they support the application on the grounds of road safety. And we'd also like to request Abra Lauer be invited to attend a future meeting to address the points raised. The amendment is proposed by Councillor Drybrough, seconded by the Chair, to continue to determine the application today. So, going to the vote then, Chair.
Yes, I'd like to determine the application today, so mine will be the amendment.
Vice Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Beretti.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Crullers.
Motion.
Councillor Dashbar.
Amendment.
Councillor Dennerley.
A motion.
Councillor Drybrough.
Amendment.
Councillor Hill.
Motion.
Councillor Howie.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall.
Motion.
Councillor Slater. Councillor Walters.
Amendment.
And Councillor Wood. Councillor Wood. Doesn't appear to be currently in the meeting. Amendments carried 11 votes to 5. That's that the application will be determined today.
Okay, so Archie already put forward a motion that this application is approved and subject to confirmation from roads that there are no road safety issues. And I've seconded that. Councillor Carruthers? Ian's hand's up, but he's maybe not with us.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Apologies, Chair. It's just this phone's been dodgy this morning. I'm looking at page 19. There's a number of concerns being raised here. I would propose that we refuse it on the following grounds: is overlooking loss of privacy. The inadequate parking I'm not going to take. There's potential. My perception is there would be road safety, but we haven't got that information in front of us. There will be, and it has proven track record of noise and disturbance, but the design and finish are out of character with the surrounding air and the local environment. I absolutely do. I believe, at least on those, at minimum, it should be refused on. And if a further application wants to be submitted, then it can be. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Sean?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, if that's a competent motion.
Okay, I'll ask Claire just to repeat the motion for everybody's benefit, and then we'll go to the vote. Oh, the amendment, sorry. Archie has the motion in already.
Okay, we've got a motion proposed by Councillor Drybrough, seconded by the Chair. That's to delegate to officers to discuss with roads on the road safety issues, and dependent on that response, the confirmation that they're supportive of the
Yeah,
application.
if roads determine that there are no issues, it's automatically approved. That's delegated to officers,
As set out in the papers.
as set out in the papers.
The amendment proposed by Councillor Carruthers, seconded by Councillor Marshall, is to refuse the application, given the, and this is where perhaps didn't pick up Councillor Carruthers very clearly, given the was it the... Sorry,
I
Councillor,
think
you have to help
Ian's
me.
signal wasn't that particularly good. Did you catch what Ian was saying, Sean? Do you want to repeat it for Claire, please?
I'll add it if you hear me.
Or David, I think David's going to encapsulate it because he got it.
Just trying to capture what Councillor Carruthers was saying. If I'm picking up on it correctly, it was to do with the effect of the development on the general amenity of the area, in which case it would be deemed to be contrary to Local Development Plan 2 Policy OP1A, which is on general amenity. So it's to do with basically the citing of it is such that it's not going to be acceptable.
Okay, I lost Ian again. You got that, Sean? You happy with that?
Yeah, Ian also mentioned about the road safety element as well. We don't feel as though that the answer that's been given back by roads does not support it on the basis of road safety.
David?
Again, that's maybe a slightly more difficult one to defend on an appeal, for the simple reason that roads officers haven't said that it warrants a ground for objection. But if you take a contrary view, then that would be OP1E, which it does cover road safety.
Happy with that, Sean?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, and thanks, Ian. Okay, I think, Claire, one more reminder of what the motion amendment
Point of
is.
clarification, Chair. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, Ivor.
Within the motion, you have delegated to the officer that if there are no road safety concerns, she can grant it. If there are road safety concerns, does it come back here, or is the delegation to refuse it?
It should come back here. Thanks for that reminder, and you can just add that to your, or Archie, if you're happy with that, in the event that the road safety officers have concerns, it's brought back to members. Thanks, Ivor. Okay, Claire, we're going to get to the end of this eventually, and then we'll get a 10-minute break. So, a motion and amendment, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We have a motion proposed by Councillor Driver, seconded by yourself, Chair, to approve the application. This would be to delegating to officers to on the grounds to sorry.
If I can come in, it's if I've got it correctly, Chair. The motion by Councillor Driver and then seconded by Councillor Dempster is to get further confirmation from roads officers whether or not they are formally objecting to the application. In the event that they confirm they are not formally objecting on grounds of road safety, then the application is to be approved in accordance with the recommendation. In the event that roads officers confirm that they are formally objecting to it, the application will be brought back to this committee.
Thank you. And David has helped with some of the proposal for the amendment, which is either David or Claire can tell us.
It's to refuse the application on grounds of it would be contrary to Local Development Plan 2 Policy OP1A in terms of general amenity and OP1E in terms of road safety.
Thank you. We've got Laura wanting to speak.
Thank you, Chair. David flagged this up, and I feel that I must say that if we do not have independent evidence saying that there is a road safety issue, then you can't use that as a grounds of refusal. So I think David was quite right in his hesitation to include OP1E. We don't have a report that actually expressly deals with road safety, so I don't think that the grounds of refusal should be mentioning them when you don't actually have independent evidence on that point.
I'll check with David, but I thought it was in members' gift to decide whether or no they felt that there was a road safety issue. It is a professional opinion that comes from officers, but I thought it was in the gift of elected members to overrule that, albeit maybe at a risk at elected members. But I'll just check with you, Laura, again, and David.
Chair, yes, that was exactly my hesitancy, because I don't think you've got the evidence there from the comments you have received, but it is open to members to make a different decision to that. That's entirely within the gift of the committee, but you would obviously then have to recognise you would have to defend that position in the event of an appeal.
And I presume Sean and Ian will already grasp that, and it's simply that because there is no specific yea or nay on the paper from Roads, their interpretation of the content of the report varies from the one that Councillor Driver and I have. Sean, are you happy with that?
Yeah, it was really just to say, though, that, it's based on the response that we've got from Roads that, if they don't support a proposal, then my natural assumption, that's what I'm basing it on, is they must have some concerns on road safety.
That's absolutely fine. If it comes to a review or a public inquiry, I'm sure you'll be able to articulate that when you're invited along. Yeah. So, on that, having taken advice from Laura, members are still content that they want that element contained within the amendment. We'll go to the vote.
Okay, going to the vote then, Chair.
Motion this time, Claire, please.
Vice Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Bretty.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Dashbar.
Motion.
Councillor Dennerley.
Amendment.
Councillor Drybrough.
Motion.
Councillor Hill.
Amendment.
Councillor Howie. Motion. Councillor Hislop.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Amendment.
Councillor Slater.
Motion.
Councillor Walters.
Amendment.
Motion's carried 9 votes to 7.
So can you just confirm the decision of the committee, and then we'll have a break, Claire?
That's the committee have agreed to delegate to officers to seek confirmation from Roads on the road safety issues. If there are no issues, then the application would be approved subject to the conditions in the report. If there are concerns, then this would come back to members.
Thank you very much, members. Thank you for that, your indulgence and your contribution. It's 12 o'clock, so we'll have a half-hour break. That'll give John and Tom time to rest, and if lunch turns up in the interim, we'll consider that as a lunch break. Thanks, members. We'll see you at 12:30. Good afternoon, members. Welcome back and welcome to the second part of this Planning Applications Committee meeting. We move on to agenda item number 5, an application for the erection of dwelling house at land adjacent to Warrain, Glenmidge, Aldgirth, Dumfries. This is a planning permission principal application, reference number 22/1162/PIP. The recommendation is to refuse, and our case officer is Claire Eckstein. Hi Claire, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is for an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a dwelling house. So I'll just go through the photographs first of all. I'll just show you where the site is. It's obviously to the west of Aldgirth. Glenmidge itself is set in a sort of little secluded sort of valley area, just to the west of Aldgirth. And this is an aerial photograph of the site, which lies to the north of a property called Warrain and Dumnonia Cottage and Glenbank. And I've also marked on where Glenmidge Burn is. The access to the site will be off the U377N, and to the right is a C-class road, C125N, which is relevant in the next photograph. This is a block plan of the site, and this is an extract because there was an issue which I've set out in the report regarding the ownership. So what some of the site boundaries that you see in terms of the sort of fence positions might quite not relate to the actual ownership of the land, and that's particularly on the boundary with Warrain. So this was taken from, going back to our original plan, this is from the C125 looking downwards. You can see it's sort of set in a hollow, and then the land rises up again up towards the U road. We've got obviously Warrain on the left, the application site. It's basically a triangular wedge-shaped property, application site extending to some, I think, 1,261 square metres. The frontage onto the U-class road is about approximately between 9 and 10 metres, and then at the back it's about 34 metres. The red line you can see just helps give you an indication of that boundary. And then this is just panning from the left of the previous photograph from the C125, and you can see I've marked up the site, Warrain, Dumnonia Cottage and Glenmidge Burn. So this is the site of the U377N. So what I've taken is this is from the access into Warrain, and you can see that there's a sort of watercourse that runs along between the dyke wall and the boundary. So that sits in behind the dyke wall. And then this is coming back again, it's looking south towards Warrain. The site itself is behind the dyke wall. You can see the sort of small line of trees. As a result of the application, the majority of that dyke wall will need to be removed to make way for the roads conditions, or suggested conditions, which would be for a lay-by to be installed. And so this shows the site frontage. So you've got the ditch sort of watercourse behind the wall, and that would need to be, as they've done with Warrain and Dumnonia, they've put in a little bridge across that watercourse, which obviously would need to be sort of a minimum sort of 4 or 5 metres wide. And then this is the northern boundary of the site, so that's panning left from the previous photograph. So you can see the existing dyke wall running up the hill. So this is from the eastern boundary of the site. So this is aligned with the rear gardens of Warrain and Dumnonia. And I've just marked on within the photograph itself just the existing. There's an existing tree, and that provides a rough indicative position of the frontage of a proposed dwelling house, and that would give you an idea of where it would be in line with Warrain. Oh, next, that's it. So this is me looking up the site boundary with Warrain, noting the changes in levels and the significant narrowing of the site as we go towards the access. This site boundary will probably change slightly just because of ownership issues, so it might be slightly wider than what you can actually sort of see in terms of where the fence position is shown. And this just gives us from the eastern boundary of the site. So you're panning right up to the site entrance, which is obviously the dyke wall, which faces onto the U-class road. So the report sets out the main issues in the determination of the application, and the proposed development has been considered against policy H3 Housing the Countryside and the associated guidance of development in the Smoulding Group, and also against paragraph 4.5 also sets out in detail this relevance to the new NPF, National Planning Framework 4. As set out in the report, the inclusion of a small building group list, which Glenmidge is, does not mean the development proposal is considered acceptable. The key concerns in regards to this application relate to the narrow site frontage being significantly smaller than the adjoining houses, up to a third less than what the other houses at Warrain and Dumnonia are. The roads requirements, which would require a highly engineered approach to accommodate not only the lay-by, but also to bridge over the ditch watercourse at the frontage, and also any potential drainage system to address potential flooding. As noted in the indicative plan, the house would require to be significantly smaller in footprint to be accommodated towards the site frontage, again showing the constraints of the site, and in addition to the above, as noted in paragraphs 4.1 and 4.20, there are other issues relating to flooding and drainage and nature conservation in regard to waterfalls, which, if members were minded to approve, the application would require additional conditions. However, given the principle of the proposal in regards to the ribbon of development, the narrow road frontage, engineering operations, the application is recommended for refusal on the grounds stated in the recommendation.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions for our case officer? Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire, for your report. I'm looking at page 32. It makes reference to both the National Planning Framework 4 and also our LDP 2. Paragraph 4.6, which we used to look at the criteria when it was housing policies, housing in the countryside. The National Planning Framework lists a number of other things there. I'm probably just trying to get to the point where how much weight do we put now that the National Planning Framework 4, does that supersede all the other, or do we give more weight? It might be one for David Sutty rather than yourself, Claire, but it just to assist me in our deliberations. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. And with Claire's permission, I'll ask David to respond to that, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Claire alluded to, paragraph 4.5 on page 32 of your agenda, I think really sets out in detail how we're going to go forward with assessing these. Obviously, NPF 4 came in just a matter of days ago on the 13th of February. So we're still getting to grips with this. The relevant policy there is policy 17 on rural homes. The bit that sits perhaps uncomfortably is the fact that they do not, within NPF 4, have an explicit allowance for things such as a small building group that we do. However, we've discussed this internally with policy officers, development management officers as well, and we've collectively come to the same conclusion, which the first point on A1 is it's a site allocated for housing within the local development plan. So we're taking perhaps a generous interpretation of that to mean villages, so policy H2 still applies, and small building groups, which means H3 still applies. Because wherever there's any doubt, you have to go back to what the policy intent is. And it's set out in 4.5. A policy intent of NPF 4 does seek to encourage, promote and facilitate the delivery of more high-quality, affordable and sustainable rural homes in the right locations. And also it goes on to say as well that they have to be suitably scaled, sited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area, which is not a million miles away from what we have for small building group policy. So our advice to you is that we don't think there's a policy conflict there, and really the greater local detail still exists in LDP2, which is still an up-to-date plan, and the related supplementary guidance. So our advice is that in this sort of application, the advice is it's not contrary to, there's no conflict, should I say, between the two development plans, but more local detail is provided with LDP2, so you should continue to use that.
Thanks, that's been helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Councillor Slater, David.
Yes, Chair. And looking at the photographs, the land seems very boggy. There's weeds growing there, and there's also moles or voles there as well. Another question is, why does it need a lay-by? It's mentioned a lay-by, and also the burn. It looks as if it will flood from time to time. That's my question, really.
I'm sure Claire will answer that, although I think the report did say there was no evidence of voles, although there was a suggestion they were there. But question's yours, Claire.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to your question regarding the lay-by, that's been the road's recommendation, that they would seek a lay-by at that point. Okay. Because it was obviously the recommendation is to refuse, we haven't sort of questioned that as to whether we would feel that was an appropriate method of appropriate roads condition. Because obviously in rural areas we try and discourage sort of over-engineered solutions. But obviously I think the photograph which shows the ditch and the watercourse, and I think that's maybe what representatives have been alluding to in terms of flooding. And when you go there, there's quite a lot of steep slopes, and clearly when it rains, it obviously all heads towards the Glen Midge burn. So we've obviously got a combination of the bridge needing to be put over this watercourse. There's obviously needing to be some engineering works, obviously just to what they're going to do about the flooding. I think I did a response in the paragraph 4.19 asking the applicant how they would address that, and that's been set out. They say that they obviously do say that it gets waterlogged, but this is due to poor field drainage, and they would intercept the water from the north, improving site conditions. But we obviously haven't got any detail on how that would occur. So if members are reminded to approve the application, then obviously we'd be seeking that detail if that was the case.
Chair, there's evidence of voles there, or water voles, or moles, because you can see...
That was page 30, there's reference to voles and herons and things.
Yes.
Chair. That's addressed in paragraph 4.20. Basically, voles, I did look into this on the Nature Scot website, so what you've got quoted there is verbatim. It's only places of shelter or protection of water voles that have protection. The water vole itself is not a protected species under the Wildlife and Countryside Act or a European protected species in itself. So if members were minded to approve it, then I think further survey work would have to be undertaken to establish whether or not there were any habitats on the site. Whilst potentially you could do that by condition, I would suggest that you probably be better to defer it just because of the protection to establish if that is the case. Again, that's if you're minded to approve it.
Thanks, David, and thanks, David. I've got Tony, do you want in as well, case of Councillor Barretti and then Councillor Walters? Tony?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Going back to page 30 in that drainage surface water in section E, and as Claire has alluded that there is problems, but it says here ground level would have to be raised considerably. Define considerably.
Claire?
Yeah, I don't because of the nature of the application, I don't actually have, it's a planning permission in principle, so I don't actually have any site levels. But I think the representative has indicated that it's 2 metres of more, and they would be looking at a floor height between moraine of approximately 600 millimetres, which is what, 60 centimetres. So there's a difference in terms of the height, and it all depends on where, ultimately, in terms of the detail you receive as to what level of engineering operation there is. But normally you would expect that the road lay-by and the access, because they've got a bridge there, they'd be set back, you know, sort of 5 metres, and it would be a relatively, the roads like to have don't want a gradient like that immediately coming off the you know, off the road, so it would be sort of flat, almost a flat access for the first sort of 5 metres, which obviously take account of the bridge. And then obviously they would need to bridge over that watercourse. I think if you look at the photograph, probably this one here. Oh, somebody's head's in the way. That's it. What? No, it's going for that far. Here we are. So that's the watercourse for. You can see how they've had to do it at Warrain. You can see the bridge, and then the watercourse, and then the site beyond, and then that's the view actually from the dike wall. So I'm overlooking the dike wall. That's the existing watercourse that would be crossed over, and then you can see how the sort of site slopes down further away. So they would have to do quite significant works just to make the access.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So we're talking considerable volume of ground movement to reset the level, and therefore the foundations of the house would be built on unstable ground, in a sense, to start with. I'm just trying to get my head around the volumes and things like that. Thanks, Chair.
I think we don't get mixed up with building warrants, building control and planning in principle. If planning in principle were approved, there would then be detailed information brought to the planning department that would have to satisfy them, know us before they brought it back to us. You're right with that, Tony? Thank you. Keith, please.
I think it's a similar question, actually. I was just on page 35, the last sentence, that you require an unacceptable degree of engineering operations to create the access for the site. Is that part of the supplementary guidance, or is that part of the policy H3, or is that something that you just have to make a judgment on, looking at the actual site? Because I've not seen that before.
I'll get David to answer this in as well, Claire.
I think it's really just due to the change in levels down from the access into the site. That combined with what you've got on page 29 with the roads officer's comments. And as Claire says, normally you look for a level access going in. Really the gradient should be no more than 8% for the first 5 metres. So to bring in a car at that level and then you're going to have to drop down considerably to get to the existing ground level. So the only other alternative is to build it up, which again is not going to be in keeping with the character of the existing properties or the area. So it really, all in all, it's just not an obvious site to put another house on. And it's probably worth as well stressing the point that this would be extending a ribbon of development beyond Warrain was meant to be the last house in the small building group when that was considered. So this is extending it further, and it wasn't really considered that it was appropriate to have more development at that time.
Thanks, Keith. If there are no other questions for our case officer, we'll invite our next speaker, Mr. Kemal Altout, as an objector. He's here in person. Kemal, apologies for the length of time you've had to wait. The same arrangement will apply. You will have 3 minutes to make a presentation to the members of the committee. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go to draw a presentation to a conclusion. And if you've been kind enough to wait in case members have questions for you, I'd be grateful. So whenever you're ready, sir, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kemal Altuk. I'm the occupier of the house Warrain adjacent to the proposed site. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak today and to thank the case officer Claire Eckstein for her patience and diligence. There's a number of reasons I object to this proposal, and I'll go through those very briefly. In terms of flooding, the site is perpetually waterlogged. Pluvial flooding occurs during heavy rainfall, and the small burn found at its western edge already has a low capacity and has overflowed as recently as January of this year. Any additional intercept and capture to this burn isn't without serious risks. A new dwelling introducing impervious materials, a bridge, a culvert, a driveway, and its own septic tank and soakaway would only exacerbate the situation in an area suffering from poor drainage. Due to the topology of the site, and you've seen some pictures there earlier, considerable groundworks to address the dwelling positioning and driveway gradient issues would be significant. This would result in elevating the dwelling floor to be higher than existing properties up to 2 metres, which would create overshadowing and overlooking, leading to significant privacy harm. Now, contrary, keeping the floor level consistent with other dwellings would leave the new property significantly lower than the elevated public road. So from the road, just the roof of this new dwelling would be visible, again unsympathetic and detrimental to the landscape. The public road is favoured by cyclists who freewheel down this steep gradients. With the narrow opening this site will have, the poor visibility display would present a serious risk to road users. Any removal of additional trees and the stone dyke beyond the site's boundary would lead to harming of the regional scenic area. It should be noted that the entire frontage of this site will be used for lay-by, again, not in keeping with the area. In 2010, when my own property, Warrain, was being built, then simply known as Plot 2, Patrick Hanna, then the case officer at the time, explicitly described to the applicant, and I quote, "The application is located opposite established residential development on the other side of the public road. It is therefore considered that the proposal represents a rounding off. Crucially, a condition is placed on to implement landscaping on the northern edge of Plot 2, Warrain, to provide a defensible boundary, to reduce the risk of the proposal, creating a precedent for further development to the north."
You have 30 seconds to go, Kamal.
Chair, members, it is my hope today that this committee not only considers my objections, but also the objections of 5 other households and those of Keir Community Council. The proposed site is wedge-shaped plot with a narrow frontage, drainage issues, unfavourable topology, and its bearing to the elevated public road does not lend itself for a dwelling. I ask the committee upholds the decision made in 2010, and I urge the committee to refuse this proposal.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so concise. Members' questions for Kamal? In that case, sir, thank you very much for your presentation today. Members were in session. Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And you know, obviously reading this report, it does. I think what I'm trying to say basically is I agree with the recommendations that the officer actually put there, and we go with the recommendations, Chair.
Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, I would second that. Yeah, why would we go against our policy? H3, thank you.
Okay, if there are there any other proposals? In that case, it's a unanimous decision with the committee. Can you confirm the decision, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the committee have agreed to refuse the application for the same grounds as are in the papers. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Members, we move on to agenda item number 6, an application for the erection of 74 dwelling houses, formation of access roads, SUDs, open space and associated works at Stanfield Farm, Eastriggs. The application type is full application. Reference number is 25-1511-full. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and the case officer is Chris McTeer. Chris, you take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The application is in front of members today as it constitutes a major development under the hierarchy of development regulations, and under the Council's scheme of delegation, this requires it to be considered by the Planning Applications Committee. The application site is an area of agricultural land in eastern Eastriggs, approximately 3.03 hectares in size. It's identified in the inset maps of LDP2 for a mixed use and housing development, and is designated ERL MU1 and ERL MU202. The LDP allocates 200 units up to 2029, which is the lifetime of the development plan, plus class 4 business units within that as well. The report in front of members today at paragraph 4.8 notes that this development has been agreed as a strategic priority through the Council's Strategic Housing Investment Programme, and as you will also see, it's the applicant is a registered social landlord, so these are all affordable housing units. Turning to a few photographs just at the beginning, the site, as you can see there, is accessed from the B721 public road that runs.
Can you just pause a minute, please, Chris? I've just had Councillor Carruthers send a message on Teams saying he's a declaration. I take it it's a declaration of interest to make. So before we go any further, Ian, are you doing a declaration?
Sure, I could have waited, but it's not going to exclude me, but this site's, the applicant's been trying to make this site work for a number of years now, and about 2.5 years ago during COVID. As part of my role, we're doing some work in the Melbourne Park Plainfield Trust. We got involved. There was delays, hiccups, so to speak, to say the least, in regards to the treatment of surface water. I was involved through the Melbourne Park Plainfield Trust doing work there, and it kind of crossed between this and another development. So just to make sure, I want to be completely upfront about that, Chair, but it's not one that will leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Apologies for that interruption, Chris. Just continue if you will, please.
That's okay. So, yep, as we can see from the photograph on the screen there, that's the B721 public road, and the site is accessed on the left-hand side of the photograph there. And this one just shows the frontage of the application site back towards Eastriggs. Oh, there we go. So as you can see from the couple of photographs that we've had up just now, the site is well contained. The boundaries are formed in the main by hedgerows and post and wire fences, and you can see just in the distance to the north there is some sort of further developments there. We've got another view back across the frontage of the site, so that's the boundary in the distance there. Skip too far. So the western boundary, as you can see there are developments to the west which form an earlier phase of this particular housing allocation. And the next picture just shows some of the developments that are ongoing. So this is the development to the west. So turning to the proposed layout, the application is for the erection of 74 dwellings and associated infrastructure. And you can see from the plan there that the dwellings are accessed from a central spine road that runs up through the development. I'm going to turn just now to some of the house types that are proposed on the site. I haven't included them all, otherwise we might be here for longer than we anticipate. But yeah, well, I won't want to keep you then. So the houses are modern design. They utilise contemporary materials and finishes. They are a mix of 1 to 5 bedroom properties, single storey, 1.5 and 2 storey terraced and semi-detached blocks. So that's a semi-detached block, and that's just an example of a terrace there. And you see this next one, just an interesting alternative bit of design there. So in terms of the finishes, they're proposed to be finished in a mix of red and buff smooth facing brick with contrasting feature panels depending on the house type. Roof will be finished in dark grey concrete tiles, fascias and rainwater goods in black UPVC, and doors and windows are in dark grey. Now, as part of the application, the applicant submitted an energy statement which was required under LDP 2 policy OP1F, which deals with the carbon reduction in new buildings. So buildings are required to demonstrate at least a 20% reduction in CO2 emissions. I'll just nudge on a wee bit. So this is achieved in a variety of ways, utilising technology and materials throughout the development. There's a bit more detail in paragraph 4.34 of the report, but just as a quick summary, because I know members are keen to hear what renewable technologies are available in dwelling houses. So all the dwellings incorporate PV roof panels. They're also utilising low energy light fittings, battery banks within the loft spaces to retain PV power. The construction is designed, or the construction and the materials used are designed to achieve compliance with the building standard Silver Standard, or at least Silver Standard, and also in line with current council policy, cable ducting for electric vehicle charging points, as that's required by a condition should members be minded to approve this today. It's just the last of the house types on there. So an assessment of the development has concluded that there's no significant policy conflicts occur as a result of the proposal, and that includes an assessment against the policies of NPF 4. Probably one thing that I would highlight, and it's more for your information going forward, having looked at this against policy 16 of NPF 4, that requires a 25% affordable housing provision. Now, it doesn't apply in this case, and I have outlined that in the report, but for developments going forward, the 25% requirement in NPF 4 would trump our own 20% requirement that's currently existing under policy H5, but not directly applicable to this, but more for members' information going forward. And for the reasons set out in the report, it's recommended that the application is approved subject to the conditions listed, and as ever, I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks very much, Chris. Questions for the case officer? Tony?
Thank you, case officer. Thank you, Chair. Took my thunder there, but there we are. But I do go back to page 48 and point 434. Now, it's nice to see that it's incorporation of PV panels and also battery banks. I think also what I would like to ask is, have you checked with Scottish Fire and Rescue about the likely conditions of battery banks? Because I believe there is potential recommendations for implementation and therefore fire safety. But also, did the applicant or know I'm not going to say 7 kilowatt chargers, but is there facilities for implementation of higher grade cabling for battery charging, for vehicle charging?
On the Fire and Rescue Service assessment or analysis, that's not yours, that's not a planning consideration. AV might be.
I would say the first point might fall within the building standards side of things, just in terms of sort of fire safety. That forms part of what my colleagues in building standards would be looking for. In terms of the cabling, we don't require the cabling. We're just the current council policy is to have the trunking in place so that the cabling can be put in the future. It's just to save, you know, parking spaces and things being dug up. If the ducting's already there, then it's a fairly minimal impact, as it were. So.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that answers my points, but it is interesting to see that these are issues which we're taking on board, but there are potential drawbacks if we don't look at them closely. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tony. I have David Slater and then Sean Marshall. David, please.
Yes, just to ask the case officer, I see the site is got hedges round about it. Could I ask, the hedges being retained, especially for wildlife? And also, as regards PV panels, is it possible that panels can be fitted to heat water as well, which that is happening a lot nowadays, and could that be included? Thank you.
Don't think that's a planning consideration either. Chris?
Turning to the sort of the first point about the landscape and the hedging, it's all included in the landscaping scheme. So we have a condition basically setting out that the landscaping scheme shall be implemented, and anything that's kept is to be kept. So. Yeah, trees and hedgerows identified as being retained won't be felled or uprooted during the lifetime of the development. So the conditions are there to hang on to that. There's obviously going to be a degree of removal, obviously for the site access to come in, but as far as possible, that's we'll retain as much as we can, whilst taking a view that some will need to come away for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Sean Marshall, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a number of points. Just the first one, I noticed, because obviously this is part of a master plan for the East Driggs area and probably welcome, but I'm just looking at the plan history. There's one 212446/FUL on page 40. It says there that was submitted in 10th of December 2021, but it's currently undetermined. Does that have any effect on this development? I'm just wondering why it's over 2.5 years old and not been determined yet. I don't know if that's a relevant question in this application. Also, with regards to 74 affordable dwelling houses, and I note that the capacity for East Driggs School is under 90%, but predicted on the house and types, etc. Is there a rough figure of how many children would require to be accommodated at the school at East Driggs? Because there is maybe concern, because it's 74 houses, that could take the school over capacity, even though it falls below the 90% threshold. And also, it showed you in one of the drawings the large open area that's been identified. Is that a potential area for the likes of, I think it's page 47, development proposals are likely to be occupied by children and young people, so there will be an expectation for well-designed, good quality provision for play. So is that area potentially an area for some sort of play park equipment, or could that be accommodated elsewhere in the development, or could it be accommodated within East Driggs itself, as long as there's adequate or provision for play park equipment. Tim, that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Chris?
Okay, number of issues to unpack there. The planning application that you're referring to is to the north of the site, so just beyond the northern boundary. I'm kind of ruing not putting up. I've got a plan that kind of shows where the developments are in relation to this, and it does rather look from the plan that it sits by itself, but it's not. There are bits of the site have already been developed, and this is just forming another part of that. So I don't have any answer as to why the application is still undetermined. Perhaps there's issues with legal agreements or other things. I couldn't honestly say at the moment, but it is the development to the north of what you're seeing in front of you just now. We are looking at an application for housing now. It's not something we would generally ask of an applicant. The number of anticipated children that may be staying or the development might bring. We did consult with my colleagues in education, so they would have an idea of how many families or how many children that would come in, but. There was, we don't really know whether that's going to take them over the 90% or not. I suspect if it were, then we would know, and they'd potentially flag up the issue of contributions. But obviously, noting that at present, registered social landlords don't have to pay an affordable housing contribution at the minute. In terms of the open space, yes, there's a central area of open space, which, in fact, if it helps, I'll bring the plan back so you can have a look and see where that is. Okay, there we go there. So if you follow the spine road up through the development, it's in the sort of the top left-hand corner. You can see it's a sort of rectangle of open space there. So that's one of the areas of open space. And as you can see, there's also an area of open space where the SUDS is proposed as well. So that area would be certainly would be one that would be earmarked for play for part of the development. But there are other sort of bits of open space around about the development as well that could be used informally for that.
Thanks, Chris.
Can I just come back to you? Yeah, just one other thing. While this is obviously it's the overall master plan. It's a part of a much larger development, but this is the most easterly of it. Now, I didn't see anything in the report, but it might be something that roads. But obviously, I think it's out with the current 30 mile per hour. So I'm just wondering if is there a condition attached that has to be moved in line with the end of the development? It might be somewhere in the report that I've missed, but I think there is different phases that will require, it's not just this phase, but I think there's other phases that are being developed that will require that 30 mile per hour zone to move further out. So it might be better, rather than do it in phases, if this is the last phase, then it's done in this one rather than actually doing it once, then doing it again.
It's in page 50, recommendation 4, Sean. It covers that very issue of the extended 30 millimetre limit.
Brilliant, yeah, didn't see that. Thank you.
Super. And for education, the Education Department has a formula that they work to, so they might be able to share that with you, Sean, but obviously it'll be dependent upon what families actually come in, whether or not they have a significant number of children eventually occupy the estate, but Education Department might help you with the formula. Thanks, Sean. Keith Walters, please.
Yeah, there's another question on the layout, I'm afraid. On page 46, 4.25, you talk about the layout generally minimising the use of the cul-de-sac. I just wondered, when I looked at the layout, I could only really see the one exit and entrance. And can you confirm that that there are other exits and entrances for pedestrians or for cyclists to actually permeate into the other side, into developments on the other side?
Yes, obviously what we look for is for what we call a sort of permeability of movement throughout sites like this, particularly one where it's being developed in phases, and we don't want to prejudice any future developments going forward. So we do look for some kind of future proofing. I have noted in the report that there are the sort of the future proof points. So there is one to the north. Two on the eastern boundary where that would allow vehicular access into the next phase. There's also a footpath link back through into the development on the west as well. So we're quite happy that, you know, although the site will be built, you know, once future phases come in, they'll still be accessible from inside this one. So you can still, you know, you still be able to move round about the wider area without coming back out onto the B721.
Thanks, Keith. I think the last speaker is Councillor Carruthers. Ian Carruthers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, just I'm going to try and expand on Councillor Marshall's question in regards to the open space. As it stands, Eastrig's got an identified open space being by the way of Melbourne Park. I think you'll be aware of that. And what I'm wondering, because we've seen it in the past, probably smaller cases, but an open space community some. So that just for that, so I'm absolutely clear in regards to that. So potentially that piece of green area could actually be. We've looked at it before, say, okay, the benefits of both more affordable housing rather than open space, and the benefits to the existing identified open space by the way of Melbourne Park potentially. Is that something that was ever considered or could be considered in the future? Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Chris.
Sorry, I'm not quite understanding the question. I mean, we have an open space requirement for all developments. It's in the order of 60 square metres per dwelling. So we're happy with the amount of open space that's being provided within this development. I'm not quite sure how you're looking for me to link it into other open space developments.
Maybe David could come back, but there's certainly a number of sites in Arndale, Estill and Estill that I could refer to where they've done away with open space. There's usually small parcels, fair enough, of land and an open space community. Some has then went from the developer to the council, and that extra housing, affordable or otherwise, has been built out. It's been an approach, I think, across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway. And there's a number, like I say, I've been referred to where they used to live, Bryker. We've seen it happening, like Eastrig's in Annan, in Gretna. It's up in actually Dumfries in the Nist area as well. A number of different places. It's about the potential of. Was there any consideration at all? I think in regards to the potential enhancements to the existing open space that's been identified with the council through by the way of an open space community. Some of money coming forward to the council then could be set in the back in real terms. Thanks, Chris.
I'll get David to deal with this, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly for a development of this scale, you'd be looking for it to have its own public open space allocation rather than a commuted payment. A commuted payment is normally used where there's some constraint on the site or it's not economically viable to provide the development with a level of open space, and it would be better for that developer to provide a commuted sum, and the council then puts that towards enhancements to an existing area. But given that this is 70 odd houses in isolation, what they've done is comply with the policy that we have on open space provision, and therefore the issue of a commuted sum doesn't come into play. And certainly the presumption is always in favour of each development having its own adequate level of open space rather than going to the commuted sum.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, David. No, we're not going to get involved in a discussion about open space. We're dealing with the application before us today. Sean?
Yeah, but Chair, I was just going to follow on from Ian's point now, because part of the application involves the open space. I think just to elaborate on that, I think the open space remains there, but there is a potential to look at, and it's been done like in Anne, etc., that you leave that open space, but you maybe relocate the play park somewhere else within the community, and that's still a potential.
Thanks, Sean. That can be a negotiation between the community and the developer. David Slater?
Correct.
Need your microphone, David.
Open spaces are very, very important to people nowadays. They do. I mean, the thing is, these open spaces that's going to be there, is there a guarantee they won't be built over in the future as such that eventually, if it's not used enough, or they say that, they could apply for planning permission to build over these open spaces, because it's part of people's well-being nowadays. You need open space. Thank you.
We've had that in the past where we protect open space and it's left undeveloped, and then a developer comes back and seeks to build in that. So it's something we probably kind of condition against, but Chris will help you.
Well, actually, I think the conditions that we have on there would cover that, because it's part of the landscaping. So there's a condition requiring the landscaping to be kept for the lifetime of the development. So I suppose in some ways that would cover that.
Unless they come in with an application later on to reconfigure the development, we can't manage against that, but the condition will protect it in the development phase.
Yeah, anything that comes forward in the future, we would look at on its own merits. So it would need to stand on its own 2 feet. So we would look at it in the context of the plan that's in place at the time, and how that would fit in to the existing built development that was already there.
That's helpful, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully it will be an open space for, as you say, the end of the development, but they are important. Thank you.
Okay, there doesn't appear to be any other registered speakers, so I'll go to the recommendation. Councillor Dryborough.
Yeah, happy to agree with the recommendations in the report, Chair. I know this organisation is really keen at keeping open spaces. They did that down in Annan as well, down at the site they did down there. So really happy to suggest we go with the recommendations in this report. So.
David Slater.
I would second that. Thank
Are
you.
there any alternative proposals? Thank you very much, members. Given that we spent an hour on this, I will convene a 10-minute break for Tom and John's benefit. Then we'll deal with the last agenda item and the two for noting. Afternoon, members. Welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to afford our BSL enjoying a small respite. We move on to agenda item number 7, an application for the erection of a dwelling house for use as a holiday let and installation of a septic tank and soak away at Hartbush Farm, Amesfield. It's a full planning permission application, reference number 22/2197/full. Recommendation is to refuse, and the case officer is Carla Livingston. Afternoon, Carla, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application is before you today because it's been called in for determination by Councillor Maureen Johnston on the grounds that the economic benefit to a rural business should be considered on a policy context against housing in the countryside. As detailed within paragraph 4.4 of my report, to all intents and purposes the proposal is for a dwelling house, and therefore the principle of the proposal primarily falls to be considered against NPF policy 17 rural homes and LDP2 policy H3 housing in the countryside. However, based on the proposed use of the proposal, it was also considered against NPF policy 30 tourism and LDP2 policy ED9 tourism. You can see here the application site is approximately 1 kilometre north of Amesfield, within the adjacent to the steading of Hartbush Farm. On the proposed block plan, the application site is between the two existing dwelling houses. The dwelling house on the left is Auchenladder. That was approved as a replacement house in 2019. And the house on the right is 1 Hartbush, which is occupied by the applicant's daughter. The proposed elevations show the dwelling house. Proposed external materials include a slate roof with white rendered walls. You'll see further on in my presentation that the proposed dwelling house is a handed version of the dwelling house Auchenladder. The proposed floor plan shows 3 bedrooms are proposed. No accommodation is proposed in the attic. This shows the application site. You can see the gable elevation of 1 Hartbush. Panning slightly left, you can see part of the driveway to Auchenladder. You can see the application site is bound by a timber post and rail fence with an agricultural field to the north of the application site. This is looking east along the access road that serves the site. This is a private access road that serves Hartbush Farm. You can see 1 Hartbush is on the left of the road, and at the bottom of the road there you can see the dwelling house nearby, which is on the right hand side of the road, and that is occupied by the applicant's son. Looking west along the access road, you can see the buildings that form part of the steading of Hartbush Farm at the end of the road. This shows Auchenladder. And this shows Hartbush Cottage. Information submitted by the agent says that the address for this dwelling house is actually 1 Hartbush. This is looking at Hartbush Farm from the U33N. As detailed within paragraph 4.8, the proposal fails to accord with NPF 4 policy 17 and LDP2 policy 3. And further to this, in paragraph 4.11 of my report, it details the reasons why the application site cannot be supported as a tourist accommodation site. For the reasons set out within my report, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carla. Are there any questions for our case officer? Ivor Hislop, John Campbell.
Just with regard to 1.5, the reason why rather than a holiday accommodation it's a dwelling house, is that just based solely on the reporter's decision? Because I think it was last month the reporter was wrong according to officers because he had allowed a house, and now that it agrees with what we're saying is right. So could you just clarify if that's the sole reason?
That'll be for David Carla, seen as it's a challenge.
Materially different proposals. The one you're referring to was where there was a claimed essential need for a house for agricultural purposes. The reporter's decision here was for a house that was going to be used as letting accommodation, and therefore it is far more comparable. It's mainly to do with just which is the appropriate policy to consider it under, and that's why it's mentioned here. It's also the next item on the agenda anyway, but it is really, as Carla set out, we've got to view this as a house first and foremost, and that's why that's H3 in policy 17 in NPF 4 are the relevant ones primarily.
I never knew that anyway. Councillor Campbell, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for your presentation, Carla. David just kind of touched on the point I was going to make, was there's two houses already in that vicinity, and I take it that they were both deemed necessary for the agricultural business. Could you just clarify that,
David,
please?
Well, I think the other one is a long-standing house, if I'm right, but the other one was a replacement house, which was a one-for-one replacement that our policy H3 allows. So that's why that one is there.
Any other questions for case officer? In that case, we have Councillor Maureen Johnson. Maureen, if you'd like to come forward, please. The same, I'm sure you know the rules anyway. You are afforded 3 minutes to make a presentation. We'll ask you with 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion, and then as per protocol, you'll then be invited to leave the chamber before members go into session. So just whenever you're ready, Maureen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application before you is for permanent holiday accommodation only, expanding a successful farm holiday-let diversification business which significantly contributes to the local economy. The report refers to a previous similar application in the Port Logan region, but each application should be dealt with on its own merits. I am confident this will be the case here. Knowing the applicant and family, I can assure you that this is a genuine application for a holiday let for the long term, not the short term as referred to in the report. There is no plan whatsoever to sell the house. It will be used solely for the purpose described in the application. If I believed this not to be the case, I would not be here today. The proposal complies with 4.9 AB 1 and 2 and should be supported. It also complies with the first 2 points in 4.10. The report ignores the wider picture of the economic benefits for all businesses associated with agriculture and tourism. Also, the applicant should be entitled to a financial return on a capital investment to continue sustaining a family farming business. This application is for the extension of a very successful holiday-let accommodation and farming business and will be an economic benefit to the area and beyond, as the D&G region requires development of this type, privately funded, and should be welcomed to support the local economy. This is particularly important at this difficult time, especially as farmers can make a considerable contribution to the economy by becoming involved in farming diversification projects such as this. In the Locher ward alone, over 900 acres of agricultural land has been sold to private businesses, pricing out the local market, good agricultural land bought to plant trees to offset carbon emissions, land that local farmers have historically rented to graze and grow crops. This is agricultural land that is no longer available for decades to come. Farm diversification schemes such as this proposal must be supported to sustain farming businesses which are so important for the economy. local employment, production of food now and in the future. This is a capital investment, accommodation built to a high standard for those wishing to experience the countryside, with all comfort and amenities provided, with ready access to the natural environment, creating a more sustainable future for the wider region. I would like to put this application forward for recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and thanks for presenting your views to the members today. Thank you. Members, we're now in session. I've got Councillor Dennerley, then Councillor Campbell.
Good afternoon. Is Maureen still in the room? Can I just check? I just wanted to ask a few questions. Thank you very much for all the information regarding the business. I just wanted to clarify quickly the local economy.
Tom,
are you talking about benefiting the local economy or not benefiting the business privately?
When a member makes a presentation, they're not allowed to wait for questions and replies. They simply make a presentation and leave. That discussion might arise during the consideration of the application. Sorry for that, Tom.
No problem, thank you.
Thanks, John. Councillor Campbell?
I take it we're in recess, Chair.
We're in session, yeah.
Session, sorry.
Recess if you want.
I wish it was, yeah, absolutely. It's been a long day. However, if members were minded to approve this, can we put a condition to say that this particular building has to be attached to the business in hand? We used to do that with the extra buildings for farms, etc. But there's a policy where with succession planning, we haven't got control over that. Eventually, we tried to sort of build a new house for the farmer to retire to, but however, that premises could then be sold in the open market as a standalone building. So I'm just wondering, is there a precedence we could put in tourism to say that this is attached? I don't know if we can or not.
No, Carla's report is quite clear, and it's been rehearsed as well in session today. This is irrespective of what someone tells you it might be. We cannot put Section 75 conditions on property anymore, tying it to the land, and this is, whether members like it or not, an application for a house in the countryside that we cannot restrict to any particular use. I think I'm right in that. David, you maybe want to clarify that, please?
No, that's absolutely correct, Chair. There was a situation a number of years ago where you could tie the development to the land with a Section 75 planning obligation, or have restrictive conditions on who could use a house in the countryside. That was something that the Scottish Government decided wasn't appropriate any longer, and therefore we're no longer allowed to do that. So no, basically what you're considering here is a Class 9 house, which would be unrestricted. I totally understand that the applicant may wish to use it as a holiday use, but equally situations could change. The farm changes hand and the house gets sold on open market. So it is the case the permission runs with the land. This is a Class 9 house. Don't know if Laura would like to add anything else to that.
No, not at all. It would be the council's got no powers to ask for Section 75 for that purpose.
So we are considering a house in the countryside.
If I may come back in, if that's the case, then I'll go with the officer's recommendations, Chair, to refuse.
Thank you, John. I'll second that. Ivor?
Chair, there's one of the plans in here that says that you can subdivide a dwelling. Is that because this site was part of the first site, Auchinladder? I think when the original application came in, it was for 2 houses for holiday let, this before Auchinladder was agreed as a replacement house. Now, the subdivide of a dwelling, is that just the actual building, or is it the actual site? Because that might allow us to look at something.
David?
Chair, the part that Councillor Hislop's referring to is on page 65 of NPF 4, where the wording is for the subdivision of an existing residential dwelling, the scale of which is in keeping with the character and infrastructure provision in the area. My reading of that is it's the existing building you'd be subdividing. So in other words, taking a large property and making it into either more houses within that subdivision or flats. So really the one which was applicable to the house, the new house which you saw in the photos, would fall under the following one, which is reinstates a former dwelling house or as a one-for-one replacement of an existing permanent house. So Carla hopefully could confirm this, but as I understand it, there was a house which straddled both the sites, and that one house was then demolished and a new house was built. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Ivor?
Chair, it's when we look at our economic development policies, is it ED2, which is rural business in the area, we look at one of the proposals which says that estates and agricultural diversification will normally be supported, or there's a presumption of favour unless it doesn't meet other conditions. ED9 also says that where you're extending a tourist facility, you can do that. Now, how do you determine when a house is a house and when a house is a log cabin? Now, whether it's a log cabin or whether it's a one of these, what do you call them? Yeah, you can turn them into permanent residences, which becomes a house, a dwelling, but you can get them through. So when is a house proposed for a business different from a brick-built one? Is that the difference? If it's a brick-built house compared to a log cabin, it's not a tourist facility.
I find that somewhat confusing, but you'll not be surprised at that, because every farmer in the country could come in with a planning application for a single house saying it's a tourist destination. And the log cabins...
Chair, but this already has a house which is part of a business that is tourist, so you're expanding which
I'll
is
let
allowed.
David answer this one.
Thank you, Chair. The site is a farm. It's not primarily a tourist accommodation. Carla's report in 411 runs into this, where really it is an existing farm which has diversified by having a replacement one-for-one house which they have chosen to use as a tourist accommodation. But the overall unit is not a tourist accommodation site, which is ordinarily limited to caravan and holiday parks. So in other words, if this was primarily a tourist development rather than a farm, which is being diversified, then that's where ED9 kicks in properly. We've given it weight, we have considered it, but as Carlos' report says, really it's not overriding. Effectively, this is an unrestricted house, therefore other policies kick into play.
I've got Andy McFarlane did have his hand up and it's gone back. Doing again, you wanting back in, Andy?
No, my hand wasn't up, Chair, sorry.
Okay, so you have a proposal to go with this recommendation that's seconded. There are no other alternative views. So unanimous decision of this committee to go with the officer's recommendation. Can you confirm that is clear, please?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the committee have agreed to refuse as per the grounds in the report. Okay.
Thank you. We go to agenda item 8 for noting. You will see the reporter made two decisions. He refused the appeal and declined to award any expenses to the council. And Pardon? Against the council. And agenda item 9, the reporter reviews the appeal. I have no other business, members. Thank you for your indulgence and your contributions today. That concludes the business. Thank you very much. Thanks, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.